Hello, everybody, and welcome to week 3, which is self-awareness. Last week, you should have taken the DISC assessment and gotten feedback on that and have some idea of why understanding yourself is so important, because then you're able to recognize how to adapt to another person. A lot of people say that there is no I in team. Well, there is. The I is you, the I is me. And you're the only one who can actually make any adjustments. A lot of times in life, we want someone else to adjust to us. But in fact, it is easier for us to make that adjustment and decide just how far we're willing to go with something and how far that relationship is important. So self-awareness is key to that. So emotional intelligence, a lot of that is what we call this whole sort of context of self-awareness, this idea that we have some motivation and empathy and all of these sort of things to be able to regulate. It's measured, it's difficult to measure and define, but it is the ability to recognize my emotions. How do I control those emotions? And what do I do when my emotions are shifting? How am I able to adjust and pivot? And how do I respond to those emotional cues? So when we talk about values, values are one of the most difficult things to change. A lot of times when we see conflicts that result because of a value system, something that is intrinsic to an individual, something that they likely were brought up with, and it is a part of the core of who they are, it can be very difficult to change those. So, for example, politics, religion, sexual preferences or orientation, all of these things, while some of those may not have been something that a person was brought up with, they are intrinsically a part of a person's value system. And changing that or trying to redefine that identity is a very difficult type of thing. And it's also like coming up against a wall. So it's something that you're unlikely to be successful on if that is the source of the conflict. So a lot of times in those sort of situations, you have to let that individual see their own path through if they're willing and want to change, or you have to kind of step back, or you need to adapt and accept the individual and the values that they bring to the table. Those are really your only three options. Changing them is not something that is on the table. And, so we have to kind of consider that, and we have to respect someone's values. So these are the basis for all of our important life decisions. They help define our own morality and ethics, and different cultures, different religions, different, all these different things will feed into this and how you were brought up. So these are difficult things to come up against and then ask someone to make a change. Your self-awareness should be able to recognize that this is something that I need to adjust forward or accept or walk away from. So what about some of the values, more corporate values, not personal values that define us, but what are some of the values that managers desire? Well, they want somebody who really does want to succeed. They want this idea of a comfortable life. Anybody who's not working because they want that sense of accomplishment, a comfortable life or something like that, ultimately will prove themselves to be less reliable, less loyal. So these are something that is very important. Self-respect, individuals need to have self-respect in order to be able to adequately respect others. So these are all sort of key traits that managers desire, professional values, if you will. This is, we talk about change orientation. This is something that you may not have probably ever heard of, but we have these individuals, and we talk about change management a lot in some of your HR and management classes. But this tolerance of ambiguity, that's the extent to which people can cope with these sort of changing and unclear situations. So that's kind of that band, if you will. How good is someone at being able to adjust to these changes or stress, etc. Then we have these two different types of locus of controls. This is the extent to which an individual feels like I can control my own destiny. This locus of control, I was the cause of the success or failure for the change. That is an internal, I did it. External locus of control, something else that caused the success or failure. So let me kind of put that in a different way, maybe a little easier to understand. Internal locus of control. My husband has this motto that he says, if it's meant to be, it's up to me. That's his model. It's a very sort of internally focused locus of control, right? I tend to say, oh, that's fate. It's destiny. That's a much more external locus control, because then I give both the success and the failure. I hand that over to some sort of an outside source. So two different sort of ways that we think through that. All right, so we've already talked about internal locus control, but it is much more associated with the successful management style in North America. I am going to climb this ladder of success. I'm going to be a part of something. These individuals here tend to be more satisfied at work because they feel like they have had a hand and that they actually control their own destinies, and that they are creating their own position mobility and upward movement. And that does kind of shuffle a little bit depending on gender, race, etc. We see these sort of shuffling a little bit, but by and large, if we look at the average, that's what's happening here in the United States. For the external locus of control, though, this tends to be found in more Eastern cultures. I don't love the use of the word coercive, but we tend to say that people can manipulate and that people don't perform well in stressful situations. I find this quite interesting. My first job out of college was for a Japanese company, and so maybe I learned a lot of those sort of management, that early management from these types of cultures as well. Okay, what are the big dimensions of personality? All right. We're not gonna, jump too far into this, but we have these five, this ability to be conscientious about what I'm doing, this extroversion. Can I speak? Am I socially aware and able to work with others? Conscientious, neuroticism, and openness. These are all sort of five dimensions of personalities that people are on one end of the spectrum or the other on. I love this quote by Sun Tzu. It says, if you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear 100 battles. And this is so true in all facets of life. I think in a previous video, we talked about, some of the disc looking at more pieces on a chessboard for their life. And, Sun Tzu really, he was saying that, if I understand myself and I know my enemy, then I kind of have a good idea of where things are going to go. And that is true. Most people, they act rationally. And if you understand where they're coming, if you understand if something's value-based, if you understand their personality and how they react to things, you are in a much better position to be, proactive. And if you need to be, then reactive in a very positive way. Okay, so what is self-awareness? What do we mean by it? Okay, this is, I understand who I am. I am going to be self-aware enough to know, I'm going to understand myself well enough to know what are my good traits, what are my bad traits. Now, that doesn't necessarily encompass self-loathing. You don't need to loathe yourself and say, I'm a terrible person, I do this and this. It means to say, I know when I've done bad things and I want to be a better person. And we can try to avoid those harmful habits as well. It's not just a personality assessment. These things go beyond that. A DI personality, it has different sort of self-awareness and these internal values and all of those sort of things as another DI. On the surface, the sort of same things make them tick, and you can sort of recognize those personalities. But as you dig down into it, those are the things that will come to light. Okay, self-aware teams tend to perform so much better on the whole, all the way across it. They have better decisions. They have better coordination. They have better conflict management, which makes a lot of sense because I'm self-aware enough to know when my inner, Hulk is going to go off, that I need to probably step back. So it makes a little bit of sense that these self-aware, high self-aware teams would be across the board much more functional than non-self-aware teams. What are some of the features of self-aware teams? Well, they tend to have a group that works together, right? We don't see this super dominating, super passive, kind of all these outliers. They really want to have everybody have a voice. They have this shared leadership, right? I understand that you're an expert in this. I'm understand that you're an expert in this. It's part of the reason why when you did your team charters, I wanted you to kind of understand what each of you brings to the table respectively so that you can have that shared culture of leadership, because those are the most successful teams. It's the kind of team that you really want to be a part of. There's this, no judgment against open brainstorming, or we understand and we're okay with saying, hey, I'm not very good at that. This is a weakness of mine. Does anybody else have a better way of doing this? Or, hey, I'm really good at that. What can I do to help? So these are some of the things that self-aware teams. What are some of the 6 ways that you can develop self-aware teams if you're a leader? Well, be present. You've got to be present. You've got to stay focused on, what is going on right then. I was, reading a book the other day, and it talks about this idea that, looking too far in the future is about, kind of hope. It gives you the possibilities, and being in the present lets you understand and adapt to the probabilities. And I thought it was just so an interesting way of putting that, because that is very much true. If you're in the present, you can adapt to the probabilities so that those possibilities can actually come true. Too many people step too far ahead and forget where they're at and gain that traction of being present right now. Moving from blind spots to bright spots. Be honest with yourself, right? If you've got an area of weakness, if you know that you have something that creates a rub for you, and it's going to be a problem, be honest enough and self-aware enough with yourself to say, okay, this is going to be a problem for me. And when those situations arise, and when you find yourself there, you're able to step back, or you're able to make a different decision. You're able to defer to someone else. It's okay to be honest with somebody and say, you know what? This is a tough one for me. I'm going to need to kind of take a step back on this one, in order to be fair to the team, in order for us to all make sure that we're doing what we needs to get done. Okay. This culture of transparency. Not everybody needs to know every single thing, but if you're in a team where there's shared leadership, you can't hold things back. You can't be secretive, right? This isn't a need to know type of situation. There are certain circumstances in HR and leadership where people are in a need to know because there's a safety, security, personal information type of thing. But in a team like the one you're on, there shouldn't be secrecy. There should be transparency. If you're not able to get something done, you need to be transparent with your team about it, because all of you are going to suffer as a result. Same thing is true in your professional environments. Turn awareness into a team practice, right? Maybe you take that 5 or 10 minutes and you're talking through some things that are coming up. These are some of the tasks that we've got ahead of us. Where are we? Does anybody feel uncomfortable? Does anybody feel like this is, something they could really shine at? What about, somebody's weakness? Do I need some help? It's okay to ask for help. I told a student one time, he asked me a question and I said, I don't know how to find out. He said, oh, I figured you'd know that. I said, well, I'm not going to lie to you. I said, why would I lie? We don't know everything. So, I sometimes I think that in our culture, we have this mentality that we're expected to know everything, especially if it's in a specific discipline. Don't feel that way. Feel comfortable saying, I don't know, but let me find out. I'd rather get you the right answer than make something up. Okay, self-aware people, they don't fight reality. They just adapt and thrive, right? I always tell people I hope for the best and plan for the worst. And that is because I like to feel like I'm rooted in some sort of a sense of reality, realistic expectations. You have to be good grief. You have to be able to pivot and adjust. And those are the marks of a successful professional, and also somebody who's successful in their personal life as well. Okay, encourage self-development, not just awareness, okay? We can't just say, hey, you're not very aware of what makes you mad, and every time somebody does this, it makes you mad, and you're clearly not aware of it. That's not really where we're at, right? We want people to be developed, not only personally, but professionally, because that's going to give them a stronger self-awareness, and it's also going to help move them away from those blind spots, right? As we talked about earlier, it's going to help them kind of retrain their brain and say, okay, these are some areas that I'm weak in. I had a mentor one time in my first job, a wonderful man, to still reach out to him to this day. And he told me one time, he said, you need to make sure that you hire people who are smarter than you. And of course I was 22. And I said, if I do that, I'll be out of a job. He's like, no, you're not understanding me when I tell you this. He said, if you're good at X, don't hire somebody else who's also good at X. He said, because then what happens is you always want to keep them just underneath you, because you're like, oh, they're not quite as good at me as X. And then we're both good at the same things and we're tracking along. He said, if you're good at X, find somebody who's good at Y. Then you complement each other, and then you achieve and you succeed a lot more. And it will show just how successful you could be. And I thought that was just really a smart comment to make. Find somebody who's got complementary skills, because then you're going to move up faster together. So that's something to kind of consider, not only in a personal, but in a professional situation as well. And if you look at these sort of dynamic teams, these teams like we saw with one of the earlier lectures with NASA and things like that, they don't all have the same skill set. They have complementary skill sets, and that's how they're able to perform at such a high level. What are some of the detriments to self-awareness? Well, you can harbor resentment. right? And you're not actually acknowledging it. You can spread negativity disguised as constructive criticism. We see this, don't we? Well, I'm not trying to be rude, but I'm trying to help you. So really be careful if you're the one giving the constructive criticism or you're the one receiving it in the way that in which it's intended. Insisting on someone else's point of view, right? Here's a big one that I see a lot. I have seen a lot with people that over the years that have been managed and that I've been a part of their evaluation is responding to feedback with defensiveness. It is tough. It's really interesting. 99% of the time, the person who's managing you is giving you that feedback to help you be better, not to help get rid of you. So if they wanted to do that, that would be a different conversation. So the way to respond to something, even when you feel like it stings, even when you feel like it's not true, is just say, that's interesting that you brought that up. I appreciate your feedback. It gives me definitely something to kind of, go through and internalize and figure out how I'm going to become better. It's a blanket statement. It doesn't mean that you've acknowledged it. It doesn't mean that you agree with it. It's giving them thanks for giving, the opportunity to give you any feedback at all to try to improve you. Now you can walk away and say, they're crazy, but I argue and I say, sometimes there's usually truth somewhere in there, and it's very difficult for us to measure that. So if we're self-aware, we're able to kind of sort out the pieces and get down to that truth that is important enough to us that we're willing to take a look at and figure out the best way to make that change. If somebody sees it, someone else in another job will also see that as well. I have found that to be the case. Okay, it's not team building. Being self-aware doesn't mean we come together and be a team. It means that we know how to function better as a team. It means we know how to communicate better as a team. It means we know how to resolve conflict better as a team. It means we share our responsibilities in our respective areas and our wisdom better as a team. It means we're helping others grow on the team better. So these are all those things. So it's not itself team building. I don't want that to be confused. What are some of the characteristics of self-aware leaders? Well, humility, right? A long time ago, there was a time where a leader was a leader. They managed. A manager managed. But now a manager really has to be a working manager. They have to understand all the facets of the jobs and to some extent be able to do a large portion of those for the people they're managing. That is what an inspiring leader is. And that is somebody that they can lead by example. For those managers of old who just lead to be leading and they have really no idea what's going on underneath them or know how to do any of those jobs, that can breed a lot of, resentment with the team. So humility is something very important, and that's a good way to come about it. They're constantly looking to improve, these types of leaders. They recognize they have deficits, they have faults. The leader who thinks that they're the best leader ever is probably not the best leader ever, right? It's the leader who always is wanting to improve. What can I do better? I'm giving you feedback to be better. What can I do to be better? Those are the best leaders because they're constantly adapting to the types of individuals that they've got working for them. They strive for more than individual success, right? A good manager, he lets the team take the success and he shoulders the failure. That's a good leader. He doesn't pawn off the failures and take the success. That's a bad leader. So think about that and the kind of leader that you want to be. So individuals with self-awareness, they have more confidence and they have a more realistic assessment about themselves. So I think, that is important when you think about your future, where you want to be and how you want to get there. Be realistic. Are you realistic? Can I accomplish a 4-year bachelor's degree in 18 months? Is that realistic? And kind of consider that because that's the type of folks that tend to have a bit more self-awareness. All right, so Harvard Business Review, they have indicated that this idea of self-awareness, it is the 21st century buzzword. When we're able to see ourselves clearly, people are just more creative. We make better decisions. We're better coworkers. We're better team members. We're better managers. And all of that translates to more profitable companies with lower turnover. So that's just, that's kind of some of the research in a nutshell. What do? How do we go about this? Well, first of all, in order to be self-aware, I always tell people that have worked for me that you need to like what you do. Now, it's work. We all know that it's always going to be work, but if I can take something that you dislike and give it to somebody who does like that, then that's going to make the team stronger. As a manager, I always used to say, tell me what you love about your job. Tell me what you hate about it. And if there was any way for me to take on a portion of what they hated about their job, I felt like that was my role as their manager. Find something that you like. If you like something, you're going to be good at it. It doesn't mean that it doesn't require work, but over time, you're able to become better at that. If you don't like it at all, it doesn't matter how good you are at it. You'll never actually be successful. Okay, so let's think about these two tiers of self-awareness. This is internal self-awareness and this is external self-awareness. And this is what I, consider this duality, these two faces, if you will. So internal is who I am, right? It's deeply inside of me, how I think of myself, how I manage everything, and everything. Then I've got this external, how other people view us, right? How do they see us? This is this slide is what I like to say, be the person that your dog thinks you are. So this is kind of this idea, and here's the biggest challenge is if our internal person is wildly different than our external person, as we're going to see here in just a second, then that is a very difficult thing to maintain. So for example, your public self-consciousness, that's how we appear to others. Our private is how we are. We think about who we are at work and who we are at home. We think about who we are with family and who we are with friends. We think about so there's this duality that exists with all of us. And the further apart your public and private self-consciousness are, the more difficult and exhausting and tiring you will find yourself. The bigger that gap, the more likely that you're going to, suffer from, some mental health issues. It's depressing, it's exhausting, it's challenging. The closer you can align that type of person, the person that accepts you for who you are privately and feel comfortable in your own skin to present that publicly and surround yourself with those type of people, the better and more successful you are going to be. If you have to be one thing in private and you have to be a totally different thing in public, that is a very difficult type of position to maintain for a very long period of time. And we've seen that with people who have had some significant mental health challenges. Of course, we see that a lot of times with comedians, that these really high-end professional comedians, Robin Williams or somebody like that, they talk about how they go on, they just put on a show, and in behind closed doors they suffer. And that is because their private and their public consciousness is so far apart that it is difficult to maintain that for any length of time, really, and come out and with a healthy state. Okay, 10% of people are actually self-aware and 90% of people think they are. So this is kind of interesting. So most of us feel like, oh, I know who I am. I know, but then I'm asking you to kind of dig deep, find those areas, find those blind spots where you're maybe not as self-aware as you think. You're not as accepting as you think, because we all have those, and those are the areas where we can start with. Why are so few people self-aware? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, we just have, senior leadership. They just don't have as many people giving them that feedback, right? People who are subordinate to them, they don't want to say, hey, you're not a great leader, especially if they're not asking for true, candid feedback or soliciting that in the way that people feel comfortable doing it. And then, secondly, the more power that a leader has, people just feel uncomfortable. So they're not asking for it and people don't feel comfortable. These are really two of the key things that we find. So what are some things, some ways that you may lack self-awareness? Well, your emotional reaction doesn't match a situation, right? Sometimes we overreact, but if you find yourself consistently overreacting and later on thinking, oh, I probably overreact about that, or people tell you consistently overreact, then your emotional reaction does not match the situation. And that shows that you have a general ability, you need to be more self-aware. You need to develop that piece of you. All right. You're defensive when receiving feedback. We've all been here. I don't know that there's anybody I've ever met that has not been defensive when receiving feedback. But as you mature and as you both professionally and emotionally mature, it does get easier to receive that feedback and then say, okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Even when you disagree, that immediate defensive, you can become a bit more controlled in that acceptance of that feedback and see that there is probably some truth and merit to it. You repeat negative emotional patterns. We see this all the time, right? One of the standard jokes that we see on TikTok is like, well, that's kind of my emotional downfall, right? That's the time, my toxic trait, I think, is what people called it. This is my toxic trait, is that I think I could do this. This is my toxic trait. We joke about that, but the reality is when you repeat these sort of negative behaviors, it does show a lack of self-awareness, because we should want to move forward and not continue to repeat that. I saw a comedian on Netflix not too long ago, and she goes, maybe I shouldn't date a DJ again. So that was, kind of one of those things, that negative emotional pattern. All right. The things that you do to make yourself better don't actually make you feel better. Okay. If you are using shopping or some sort of alcohol, drug addiction, whatever it is, even exercise, even things that seem healthy as a way to make yourself feel better, then those are really sort of negative behaviors in the long run. And they showing that you're lacking self-awareness and the inability to want to handle it where it is, which is here and here, right? So it's not going to be handled on the, on the gym floor, playing basketball. I mean, yes, that's a great way to get emotional release, but if that's the only way that you're actually addressing the issue, then that's an issue. Okay. If you haven't found a way to be consistently successful, if you continuously find yourself failing and coming up against it, we're blaming everybody else. We're blaming the world. We're blaming our parents. We're blaming our peers. We're blaming our boss. We're blaming everywhere. And we never actually take that moment to say, maybe it's me. It could be me. Then that shows a lack of self-awareness as well. Okay. Some of the secret elements, good grief, I've had trouble this lecture. The secret element about self-awareness that nobody talks about, it's vulnerability. People don't enjoy being, self-aware because they feel like, oh, it's going to make me vulnerable. I'm going to be weak if I try it. I answer my questions honestly. I'm going to be weak. That's why I told you that on the DISC assessment, even though it wasn't necessarily about self-awareness, be honest. This is only going to help you. If you are not honest, then you don't know where to begin. Okay. So why is it more important? Well, it will strengthen your relationship because you have a better idea of how your response is and how you want to adapt to others. It's going to make a positive change and bolster your self-esteem because you're more confident. We already learned that self-aware people are more confident. It's going to improve my decision-making because I understand all of the things that I need to consider, right? I'm going to hope for the best, plan for the worst, and I'm going to be prepared. So, and it's going to make you overall healthier, mentally and physically healthier when you are more self-aware. When we think about people who lack self-awareness, they tend to have, more conflict in their personal relationships. They tend to be, their mood tends to be, this is demonstrating that the mood is kind of down, but I would say their moods either are consistently down or they're really peaks and valleys, right? They struggle with that as well, that kind of up and down that you see. And they feel like they just can't get a break. And this is oftentimes the result of that as well. How do we fix that? How do we change that negative cycle and become more self-aware? Well, these ideas that we need to really be able to accept and understand feedback from those around us and solicit it. If you're my friend, you'll be honest with me. If you're a good boss, you're going to be honest with me and help me grow. I want that. And sometimes you have to reach out and ask people to be honest with you and give you that kind of advice so that you can grow. And then you have to be able to know that whatever they're telling you, they're not telling you out of malice. They're telling you because they care for you in some way. Maybe they professionally care for you. Maybe they personally care for you. But either way, you've asked their advice to help make you better. And so it's a good point to kind of listen to that and figure out how to do it. Okay, so we've got these sort of interesting 4 areas of self-aware archetypes, if you will. So we've got these high internal self-awareness, low external self-awareness, right? I'm internally, I know who I am, I know exactly whatever, but then, externally, I don't have a lot of self-awareness when it comes to what's going on around me. So these are these introspectors, right? They're clear on who they are, but they don't challenge their own views, but they are really have they're challenged when they have blind spots or getting feedback from other people. And so that's kind of something to think about. What about these low internal self-aware people, right? But they're low external. They're low all over the place, right? They're seekers. they're confused. They don't know what they stand for. They're frustrated. They just feel kind of like they're wandering lost. What about the folks who are high internal and high external, right? These are great. They're aware. They're willing to accept that feedback. They want to give feedback. They want to improve. They know their blind spots. They know their weaknesses. They know their strengths. They know kind of how they should, dip and dive and do a dance move with someone else. These are really strongly aware people. What about people who have low internal self-awareness and high external self-awareness? Just the opposite of the introspectors. These are people who are pleasers. I know, I really care a lot about what other people think about me. And a lot of that is because internally, I'm conflicted. I have a lot of self-loathing. I have a lot of confusion. Should I be this? Should I be that? Or whatever. So they really care too much about what other people think about them, and they don't have that good balance. So for team self-awareness, why does it matter? Well, if you can have a strongly self-aware team, you're going to have a team that understands how to work together. They're going to have forethought of execution. You're not going to have groups that just dominate one another. They're going to have a voice for everybody, and it's going to be much more efficient to be able to work together. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. There's going to be less conflict as well. Okay. What are some of the 7 ways to develop self-aware teams? Well, you need to be present, as we've talked about before. That's one of the things that you need to do. You can't, you're going to increase your productivity if you're present, right? If we're, when we talked about before, as I said a few minutes ago, being present helps you determine the probabilities. Hope helps you think about the possibilities. You need to be present to define exactly where you're going to get to that next step. Don't live too far in the future. The power of why. The power of why is, what can I accomplish in life, work, at home? All right. The leader's role in building team awareness is, they need to understand that, they really need to develop this team, right? They need to recognize leadership in others. That's what I was telling you about my previous boss, is that when you hire people who are smarter than you, when you hire people who compliment you, you're not defining your leadership by power and coercion. Your leadership is determined by your ability to work together and achieve more and be successful. And that is how you can build self-awareness in teams. Why is it so important? Well, you got to understand yourself in order to be able to understand others and the impact that you have on them. So that is really kind of boiling that down, some of the things that we think about. What are some of the qualities of a self-aware leader? Well, you need to understand and demonstrate your values. What are your values? I need to know it, and I need to know what yours are as well, so that I can make adjustments around that if that's a problem. Highlight the strengths and mitigate their weakness. I need to know that I am able to, here's my strengths, and how am I going to complement it with my team? Because, I have areas that are weak, and I need a good team that will help adjust for that. They intentionally use their time. They have fantastic time management. You will see this in a lot of self-help books out here, right? This idea that people who have time management are the most successful people that you will find. They communicate what they want to say, right? We don't necessarily mean that communicate in a blunt, way that is rude and aggressive or offensive. Not necessarily. We just say, hey, this is what I want to say. Maybe I am a bit more, poetic about how I say something if it's not very nice, but I don't shy away from saying that and communicating. We manage our emotions and our stress, right? If you're going to be upset about something, a lot of times what I have found is that people are very concerned about saying, I'm going to need to take a little bit of time to think about that. In our society, we live in a very reactive society, and someone comes at you with something, you feel the need to immediately jump in and say something. You don't need to do that in any type of environment, unless it's really, truly life or death, and you don't have the time to do that. We all have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, a day, whatever, and just say, you know what? I am right in the middle of something, and I want to give this conversation the time and energy it deserves. So can I get back with you in just a little bit about that? And that gives you time to be reflective. And when you come back, that person is going to be reflective about the situation, hopefully a little bit more, maybe not, but you will at least understand why they're coming from the direction they're coming from, and be in a better place to absorb the criticism or the aggression or whatever it is that they're bringing your way. It's hard to do that on the fly. You're open-minded, okay? People are different. We have different ideas. We have different ways of approaching things. And when we're single-minded or single-focused and we do not want to go past our own way of doing things, well, this is how it's always been done, then we limit ourselves. If we're self-aware enough to realize that there are other ideas, other approaches, other people, then that opens us up to finding a way that may be more successful for the group that we're in right there. I told one group I was consulting with a little while back, I said, look, here's the thing. I don't want to hear we were doing a new strategy for them. I said, I don't want to hear anybody say we've tried that. It doesn't work. I said, you may have tried it. It may have been the wrong time, may have been the wrong people. You may have not have had the resources. I said, let's not put anything off the table. Everything's on the table if somebody comes up with it. And I think, if you're open-minded to that, sometimes you realize timing is everything. They develop an empathy and understanding for others. We're all people. We all have problems. We all have things that are happening in our lives. And despite the fact that social media would have us believe otherwise, that people's lives are perfect, the fact is they're not. And you never really know what's going on with an individual. So having that empathy and understanding, that doesn't mean it's a lawless, rule-breaking society. There are boundaries and there are guardrails that we have to have in place, but having empathy for another person goes a long way. And it also shows them that when you are in a situation where you need that reciprocated, that they are able to do so. We set healthy boundaries, right? We set healthy boundaries. We live in America where that really goes on top of each other. I actually had the conversation with my husband today, about my work office here. And I said, look, I like it being separated. We have a desk, that's built into our kitchen. He said, why don't you work here? You could be around me. I said, look, I like to have my desk separate so I can leave the office for the day, even when I've worked here at home. If I'm not at my office at Tahlequah or Broken Arrow, I want to leave it. I want to leave it behind and set a boundary. I don't have to just be wrapped up in it continuously. So you need to be able, especially with more people working from home, set that, work-life boundary, that self-boundary. I once told a young lady at the end of this class when I was doing some individual assessments, I said, look, the challenge that you have is that you come from a culturally different, country. And I said, and you're very closed off. I said, but here in America, you need to create, even if it's an artificial kind of ring around you, to say, this is how much I'm going to let people feel like they can come in. Because that creates and establishes trust here. Here, we're kind of a bit more open with our feelings and our backgrounds and things like that. And the most closed off of us need to create a boundary. This is as much as I'm willing to let you know. It doesn't mean you have to give them everything that's up close to you, but you create that artificial boundary. Are you willing to let them know that you have a child or that you have hobbies or whatever that is? Just a sense that this is where I'm willing to be, and this is as much as I'm willing to give, to create and establish some of those trust with those around you, especially those around you who are definitely sharers, because they feel a little locked out when someone doesn't want to share at all. And finally, for this week, the characteristics of a self-aware leader. We've already talked about this. I don't know why I've duplicated this slide, but if we once again go through, we really need to think about how we are. It's fantastic to have successes. It's another thing to have successes where we brag on them, and that we're just not giving others the credit that is due. If they played a role, they deserve a part of the success. It doesn't matter how minor or insignificant, they're a part of that team that got you there. Sometimes the minor insignificant person is the one who really ends up being one of the most important links. I had a family member one time, and I asked, and I said, hey, why you went to medical school? But you didn't go to, you didn't want to be a thoracic surgeon. You didn't want to be a heart surgeon. You didn't want to do that. You wanted to be a perfusionist. Why did you want to do that? He said, because he goes, while the other person gets all the accolades, I'm the person who actually keeps you alive. He goes, when we do transplants and things like that, I'm the person who keeps you alive. He goes, sometimes the unknown person ends up being one of the most important links in the entire system. And so that is very important to keep in mind as well. Sometimes that person may not seem like the most obvious leader, but they are very important, and they deserve that accolade, and they deserve a portion of that success. All right, folks, this has been Self-Aware, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks so much. Bye.